Welcome to Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. My name is Victoria Bert. I'm the producer of this show. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit New York City, millions of Americans began losing their jobs in March, and the federal government stepped in with a life preserver, $600 a week extra in unemployment benefits that allowed workers to pay rent and buy groceries. It really was a cushion for the economy. The benefits program, the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, expires at the end of July, which will leave most people with regular unemployment benefits, which is only about a few $100s a week. Joining me now is James Parrott, an economist at the New School Center for New York City Affairs. Welcome. How are you, James?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm fine, thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about what it looks like when this extra $600 a week goes away.
What we're experiencing now is unprecedented unemployment. This is very unusual in its economic impact. It's not like a usual recession that hits sort of a cross-section of the economy, hits high-wage jobs in finance and professional services. This is really, because of the nature of the public health situation, concentrated in industries, largely service industries that tend to be much lower paid. 1 million plus New York workers, maybe 1.3 million New York City workers dislocated as a result of this. If they qualify for unemployment insurance under the state system, they would be receiving half of what their usual earnings are. For many workers, that would be a weekly unemployment benefit of $250 to $350. That translates to a total of about $800 million in additional spending in the city's economy that's been coming in recent weeks that will go away. That will have an even further depressing effect on the level of local business activity and probably cause unemployment to go even higher.
So it's not just one-sided, right? It's not just, let's say I'm unemployed and I'm getting the extra $600. Some people perceive it as, okay, so you don't have that $600. That means you're going to go back to work. But what it really means is that $600 isn't also going into New York City's economy.
Right. We're looking at a situation where we expect double-digit plus unemployment that is in the 15 to 20% range for several more months. If you take that $600 away, the level of economic distress is going to mushroom in New York City very quickly.
I was reading a New York Times article this morning, and it talked about the fact that some businesses are saying people aren't going to go back to work if this continues. Is that a realistic fear for small businesses?
I think there are a lot of factors that are affecting a decision on whether or not a worker returns. What businesses have to keep in mind is that if you take that $800 million in spending out of the New York City economy, you're going to see a lot lower level of consumer demand, and businesses then will not be as interested in hiring back work and having workers come back because the level of consumer activity and spending, the demand for what their services or products they're selling is going to be less as a result.
So let's play this out. Let's say we don't get the extension and the $600 goes away. How quickly do we see this devolving?
It could show up as early as August 1st when people have to make, if their rent payments due on the first of the month.
This can't go on indefinitely, this extra little, this $600 addition to the unemployment, right? Right? What are we staving off? I mean, isn't it eventually going to happen? I mean, how long can this go on? And is it reasonable to think that what we're trying to push away won't just happen anyway?
As long as there are significant public health concerns that prevent businesses like restaurants, local services in retail, and arts and entertainment from returning to a full level of activity, we're going to need additional federal assistance. We're going to need to see expanded investments in childcare in order to enable parents to go back to work. The extended period in which we're going to be operating, many businesses are going to be operating at less than 100% of capacity. We're going to need things like public service jobs program and an infrastructure jobs program in order to provide enough employment demand. And ultimately, it would be better for people to have work of some sort than to just sit at home and rely on the $600 weekly supplement. In the short term, we need to continue that because otherwise there's going to be another layer of economic calamity on top of everything else we're experiencing now.
Let's say we get to a vaccine, because I think that would be the clear moment of demarcation, right? We get a vaccine. It's still going to take a considerable amount of time for the economy to sort of turn back around. I mean, it collapsed very quickly, but it's not going to come back very quickly, right?
Absolutely. Excellent point. It's going to be a long time before we get back to that level, but we should, and my expectation is that by the end of 2020, New York City will have unemployment in the 15 to 20% range. So that's hundreds of thousands of people without jobs. And what we're also going to see, to a greater extent than we've seen in any recession, any of the last 4 or 5 recessions, we're going to see a lot of small business closures. Best case scenario is that come the fall, restaurants are operating at 50% capacity. Right? Not many of them can stay in business, pay their rent, pay their workers, pay all of their expenses with only 50% of the revenue.
We were in a small business desert as it was, right?
Right. It was very hard before all of this, and you take away 50% plus of their sales, businesses can't hang on for very long. So we need more targeted federal assistance. Otherwise, we're going to be facing a situation with 15% plus unemployment, for the better part of, early 2021.
Because it's not only going to be the businesses that are going to be operating at, say, 50, 60%, the face-to-face businesses like you talked about, but it's the businesses that won't survive that's going to contribute to the unemployment as well.
Right.
I mean, big, huge corporations like Lucky Brand and J. Crew aren't coming back, never mind just the restaurants and the mom and pop stores.
Right. We've already seen bankruptcies of some fairly large companies, which were sort of, that was bound to happen in any economic downturn. We've seen some degree of sort of corporate bankruptcies. That's likely to continue. And that will only compound the economic challenges that we're facing.
I think about New York as being in this sort of perfect little bubble of these exorbitant rents and commercial and private. And you add in this pandemic and everything just burst.
If people are not employed and don't have incomes, they're not going to be spending that money. And without that consumer spending, then a lot of the economy grinds to a halt sooner or later.
Let's talk about the fact that the regular unemployment, New York unemployment, is really below what I would think would be a standard of living for anybody that lives in New York City. I mean, it seems extremely low. How can that be made better?
So right now, a low-wage worker only receives a regular unemployment benefits. That's 50% of what their average earnings over some base period were. In some states, that's 60%, as high as 70%. So we could increase that ratio. We could make it, we could increase the maximum benefit. The maximum benefit is only $504 at this point. New York is one of the highest wage states in the country, and yet our maximum benefit only ranks, about 19th or 20th among all states. So we could have a higher maximum benefit as well. And one area that really, cries out for attention, and there was already some legislative interest in this before the pandemic occurred, in remedying some of the shortfalls in the partial unemployment insurance system in New York, so that the people who are able to go back to work but only on a part-time basis, whereas they might have had full-time work before, New York really penalizes them for working on a part-time basis. A lot of the workers who have gone back are only working part-time now. It's very hard for them to hang on because they're going to lose they lose a lot of their unemployment benefits when they go back to work on a part-time.
Yeah, that's really a rock and a hard place. Somebody is out because of the pandemic and their job comes back, but it's only part-time.
That's something that the legislative session in Albany currently should be addressing.
James Parrott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.